What I'm going to do now is hand over to Richard Swann, who's going to come up here and interview two people to transmit back to the rest of the world some thoughts. And I'll leave it to... Where's he gone? Oh, there. Leave it to you to take it on from there.
Good afternoon. In order to do the interview, I need the two willing interviewees to join me on the stage. And I also, yes, Jane, I need the correct PowerPoint slide. I'm wondering whether we could use the stage a little bit. So talk amongst yourselves for a second whilst I sort out my props. I may not be the geese, but I need props too. To send some of you asleep. So please try and stay conscious at least for this next 10 minutes. Okay. Thank you, Clark. Now, I'm a social worker. I am a social worker. I've been a social worker since June 1993. And I have the good fortune of having somebody here that I did my social work training with many moons ago. I also got people here that have really influenced my practice since. And one person who really influenced my practice was the late, great Dr. Tony Morrison, and I'm very honoured to be speaking in front of his family this afternoon. When I walked into this room, I saw that there were lots of international flags, and it made me think part of Tony's appeal was that he could make his thinking transferable across international boundaries. It made me think about that ability that he had in getting us to think, even jumped-up social workers like me, to think about working beyond my professional boundaries. And a lot of the focus today, I think, has been on social work practice, but I know there are many of you that don't come from a discipline of social work or have a background in supervision. So the purpose of this next 9 minutes will be for me to have a Kolb-based, there's a clue up on the screen behind me, a Kolb-based, open-ended, supervisory conversation with Dipti, who's sitting to your left, and Barbara. And I'm going to start with asking Barbara just some questions about Barbara's experience of Tony's material and her reflections on how that's made an impact on Barbara's role, and also how that's brought forward her thinking and practitioners' thinking. And I'm going to be asking you to think about this and think about a particular question, which is, from Barbara and Dipti's story, if we're using the metaphor of story, which Tony used a lot, what of their story resonates with you? And importantly, if this conference is going to be meaningful, how are you going to bring forward Tony's legacy in the work that you do with supervisees and supervisors? So, no pressure then. Right then, Barbara. This is like Kolb cycle meets Parkinson, I think. Barbara, could you, for the benefit of the audience, could you just explain your role, first of all?
Hi, I'm Barbara Simpson. I've worked with Tony since 1980 when I worked for the NSPCC in Manchester. And Tony was at Rochdale and I was at Whitefield, and I had the privilege then to work with him, and he never changed. He always dealt with people in that compassionate, intelligent, sensitive way. I currently work independently. I do some work with In-Trac. I also work for Lincolnshire Children's Services, Children with Disabilities Service, and manage the Early Support Care Coordination Team at the moment, although that's coming to an end. And for the last 15 years I've chaired the Management Committee for Women's Aid, and that's where most of my supervisory experience is. So you've got about 3 minutes left now after all that, sorry.
Yeah. Yes. I picked the wrong volunteer, didn't I? No. No, I jest, Barbara. And what are your reflections then, Barbara, about how Tony's work and his influence has had an impact on the staff and the client group that you work with?
my main role has been in training and managing the training team in Lincolnshire and now working independently. Tony's material is just so accessible and it's so linked to practice. That's why it's so beneficial. It's not intellectualising that disappears into the ether. I could say disappears somewhere else, but I won't. It just, you know, it just works. So they're tools that we can use. So training is a joy using Tony's material because it is so, it's so usable, and every tool that you use, the team or the people you're training can take back to their team and use with their supervisees, with their teams. You know, all of the exercises can be used, and it gives a really safe sort of sense for the trainer because you know it works. And I can't always say that about my trainer. No, I didn't say that, but it does work for Tony. It, you know, it's fantastic, and you can see the absolute links with practice, so people can go away and use it straight away. And I would say, just on my work with Women's Aid, that's a very emotionally laden job. Staff who are dealing with, you know, women who have experienced dire abuse. That comes to that service, and often the staff respond emotionally, and that's another aspect for Tony's work, is that you can manage help them manage their emotion by using the Kolb cycle, so you can go through into analysis and action planning instead of the short circuit, which they just want to, you know, sort of act quite often, and sometimes it's a bit of an emotional outpouring which you can manage by using the materials of Tony.
And thank you, Barbara. And could you maybe before you hand the microphone of responsibility over to Dipti, could you say something more about how Tony's work really empowered practitioners' thinking? Because we heard earlier on from Eileen Munro that critical analysis, the ability to think what is going on and evaluate what is going on, is often missing if a culture is not about a culture of learning. So I'm wondering how Tony's work, you mentioned the Kolb cycle, but how Tony's work has fostered thinking.
I think by linking, from my experience anyway, linking the sort of the experience and action, and it's linked very much to a service user story as well, but linking that into analysis in order to inform planning has just been essential, crucial, critical to the whole process of analytic thinking. And it makes people think about evidence. I've used it recently with a member of staff really effectively in putting together a court report, because their response to doing a court report about a domestic violence situation was their own emotional outpouring, and we actually used Kolb to really look in some depth at it. So there was a direct impact for the worker in managing their emotion, a direct impact for the service user in sort of feeling safe with the work that was going on, but a direct impact at the court as well, that the court report was put together in such a way that got people to reflect about the woman's experience rather than judging her for being the victim of abuse and then not being a good parent, which so often happens. So it was critical to our work. Yeah,
Thank you very much. Dipti, thank you again for volunteering, or being volunteered. I'm a hard man to say no to. Dipti, it would be really helpful if you could just explain to the audience your role, because your professional role is very different from Barbara, and maybe then if you could explore how the legacy of Tony's work has had an impact with the Family Nurse Partnership across the UK. Thank you.
My name's Dipti Aistrup, and I'm a supervisor for a Family Nurse Partnership program in Sheffield. I never had the fortune of meeting Tony, but I contacted him because one of the aspects of training that was missing in Family Nurse Partnership program was safeguarding supervision, and locally I made inquiries about how we could access this training, and somebody said, oh, ask Tony, his work is fabulous. I'd come from a health visiting background and hadn't really had a particularly strong history of supervision other than safeguarding supervision itself. And Tony was really helpful just by email, and his diary was really full. He was very interested in the work we were doing, but he suggested that I could contact Richard to do training for FNP supervisors. So we had the training that Tony's developed through Richard, and it has really had a significant impact on Family Nurse Partnership Programme. The nurses that I work with offer an intensive home visiting programme to first-time teenage parents, and so it is quite an emotive, intensive work, and challenging some of the feelings around the nurse's own emotional state is really it is difficult sometimes, but the way the program works, you know, using the Kolb cycle, really helps the nurses to understand the importance of not just looking at the story and not just looking at the information, but being able to reflect deeply and then to be able to analyze, so that they then deliver an action plan which makes some difference. It is an intensive program that wants to make a difference, and I think Tony's work really helps us to demystify supervision and make it really simple and easy to understand, and really think about the outcomes for the service users. So one of the questions I often ask the nurses that I work with is, how do the clients know that you are having supervision, and what happens for them that makes them feel that supervision is important in their own outcomes? Is that okay?
Wonderful. You took yourself around the Kolb cycle. I didn't need to say very much, did I? Okay. So thank you very much, Dipti, and thank you, Barbara. And if I just leave you with one message from me, jumped up social worker. I think that we're the guardians of this process that's behind Barbara and Dipti, the Kolb cycle. Because in our helter-skelter, hurly-burly rush to get things done, we can miss out on recognizing the impact that emotion has on our understanding of what we're seeing. And if we do that, then how do we know that our thinking is the right kind of thinking? So don't fall into the trap of the short circuit, as Tony would have said. Don't go from experience, what's the story, to an action plan, because how do you know that your action plan is going to be worth anything? Reflection and analysis give us a strategy to know how to use the relationship. That helps move things forward. So I'm hoping that some of Dipti's and Barbara's story will resonate with you in order to help you think, how do you move forward Tony's legacy in the future? Thank you very much. And a round of applause, please, for Dipti and Barbara. Thank you.